Alright guys, part 2. I'm recording all these parts in the same day, but I might upload them at different times. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. But anyways, the Wind Waker is next. Now this game, a lot of controversy with this one when it was first shown off at, Space World 2001, I think, where they showed off the cel-shaded graphics, and of course everybody was like, what the fuck? No! Like, what are you doing to Zelda? And of course, like now, in my eyes, Wind Waker is still the best-looking Zelda game. The cel-shading visual style is fantastic. It is a gorgeous game. And it's funny now, like, they're doing the remake on Wii U, which I'm excited to play that. Wind Waker I haven't played since it came out on GameCube, but I'm excited to play this remake. Although, from what they've shown of the visuals, I still kind of prefer the look of the GameCube version, but there's still a lot to see on the remake. Anyways, Wind Waker is actually one of my favorite 3D Zeldas. It's definitely up there in the rankings for me. And now the reason for that is the reason that most people didn't seem to care for it, and that's the sailing, the exploration. This game, as far as Zelda games go, has the most rewarding exploration. The world is so vast with so many things to do. I don't know, I never got tired of the sailing. There was always new things to see and new things to do. And it has what a lot of the newer Zelda games lack, which is the exploration. And I feel Zelda games should always have that. They should always have that feeling like you're on a grand adventure. And Wind Waker completely nails that. The storyline's also quite good, very epic, culminating in an amazing final boss fight. If you haven't played Wind Waker, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's quite amazing, and it's ballsy too on Nintendo's part, I think. A lot of cool throwbacks too to Ocarina of Time in this game. The dungeons were well designed. Really enjoyed the dungeons in this one. The Wind Tower type dungeon I think is still one of the more difficult dungeons in the Zelda history. Of course, I think Majora's Mask, if you're looking at dungeon difficulties for 3D Zelda games, Majora's Mask, I think, had the hardest ones. Like Stone Tower Temple, I think that, like, Great Bay Temple was kind of annoying, too. But this game, the dungeons were fun. I love the visual style. The music is fantastic. The last Zelda game, I feel, to have a truly amazing soundtrack. And honest, no, I'm not going to say that yet. But anyways, Wind Waker, a brilliant game. One of my favorite 3D titles in the series. I'm very excited to go back to it when the new remake on Wii U comes out. After Wind Waker, we had The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap, which is what I feel to be the last truly amazing Zelda game. The games that come out after them, we'll get to them. Minish Cap, again, was a title developed by Capcom, like with the Oracle games, and this game is just as excellent. I love the art style in this one. I don't know what it is about it. It's very appealing to me. Now, the thing with this Zelda game, I will admit, I have some complaints maybe. I think the dungeons in this game, from what I can remember, it's been a few years since I played this, but they're pretty short from what I can remember. The game itself, for a Zelda game, I feel is kind of short. The overworld itself is not quite, like, I like it, but I don't know, it's a bit lacking, and it's quite small, I think. The game just has a very small feel to it, I think, which I guess is perfect for a portable Zelda, but when I play Zelda, I want that kind of epic feeling. The storyline, I can't remember too much about it, but I do remember it being quite good. The main gameplay hook with shrinking Link down to like a tiny figure, that creates some really cool puzzles. The game is just really clever from what I can remember. I'd like to play through this game again too, actually, because I remember this game just being a total blast. Music, not quite as memorable as the Oracle games, because this came out when I must admit, this came out at a time when I didn't have nostalgia for certain games. Like, I don't have nostalgia for this game by any means. I wasn't hyped for it either, which is odd. But I don't know, it's one of those Zelda games that it's consistent quality, start to finish. The dungeons are well designed, it's got a lot of humor from what I can remember too. I gotta say, out of all the Zelda games, this is one that I'm struggling a bit to remember a lot about it, because it has been a while since I've played it. But it is a fantastic game, I must say, overall. After Minish Cap, we had Twilight Princess. Now, like Wind Waker, this was a really hyped up game too, because people were excited for a return to like a realistic looking game, or like a game that wasn't cel shaded. And that to me was always baffling, because I think Twilight Princess is the ugliest 3D Zelda game. I prefer the visual stylings of Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, actually. Twilight Princess had a teen rating, which was first for the series, and a lot of people say it's quite dark, and it is to a point. I still think Majora's Mask is a darker game. Now, Twilight Princess, I like Twilight Princess. I know it gets a lot of hate, but I don't know. I think I like it overall. There are a lot of aspects about it that do annoy me. At this point in the series, I think it's when people started to notice that the formula was maybe getting a bit stale. This game plays just how all the others did, and it does lack some creativity in the dungeons, I feel. Some of them are really cool and awesome. The last dungeon in particular, it's like a sky dungeon. The music, it helped create a wonderful atmosphere that I hadn't felt like an amazing atmosphere like that since Majora's Mask, so I thought that was really special. A lot of the other dungeons, though, were kind of derivative, especially the first three, like the fire one and the forest one and the water one. Like, those were just, I don't know, those I didn't care for that much. It's mainly the second half of the game where I feel it definitely was stronger. Now, this game had some really cool items. One item, the spin top thing, where you kind of ride the spin top, which is used against a boss in the sand area. I don't remember what that dungeon was called, but that was just wonderfully creative and fun. The problem with this game, though, is these items, you use them a couple times, and then that's it. The rest of the game, you like never use them again. Another problem I had was I think they're called the Twilight Realms, where you play as the dog and follow a scent and engage in like the wolf combat. I said dog, but wolf combat. Like that, I don't know, I think there was too much of that stuff in the game, and it got tedious really fast. I don't know, like with the newer Zelda games, I'm finding too many of them are relying on gimmicks, and I don't know, they just aren't up to that quality that the older games have, and Twilight Princess, I feel, is like that. This game suffered a game-breaking bug. I thankfully didn't hit it, but a lot of people did, which, not so great. So I feel like I'm being hard on the game, but overall, it is still a great game. The formula still works. The formula is still fun. The storyline, I don't remember too much about it, to be honest, but I do remember Midna being quite a strong character with a lot of development there, and some really interesting things happened with her later in the game. And her relationship with Link, I think, is quite strong, too. But overall, this game, it's good. I like it. I'm not itching to go back to it like a lot of other Zelda games. I will eventually at some point. I played the Wii version, which a lot of people hated the motion controls in that game. I actually didn't mind them as much as most people. Yeah, they're tacked on, but they weren't bothersome, if you know what I mean. So I'd like to play the GameCube version, because I like that just standard control scheme. But yeah, overall, Twilight Princess, I like it. It's not amazing like previous Zelda games, and it's definitely one of the weaker 3D Zelda games, I feel. Of course, you know, all opinions. I know when this game came out, a lot of people really enjoyed it, and now I'm starting to see public opinion changing on it. Okay, this next game. Now, if you're a fan of this next game, you might just want to skip the next 5 minutes or so, because this could end up being a bit ranty. Phantom Hourglass, Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass, the first game on the DS. Now, this is, I'll flat out say this now, I feel this is the weakest Zelda game in the entire series, and as a game itself, in my opinion, I think it is terrible. Now, I guess explain why I think that is. Now, first off, because this was on the DS, Nintendo had to feel like this needed a DS stamp on it. It needed to be a DS game. DS, what it's known for, the 2 screens and the touchscreen. So Phantom Hourglass is controlled entirely with the touchscreen. You move Link around with your stylus. You use all your powers with the stylus, your items, and now this created some cool things. How you use the boomerang, for instance, I thought that was kind of neat. How you charted routes with your ship, which this actually brings back the Wind Waker sailing. but nowhere near as good. Okay, first off, the overworld in Phantom Hourglass is boring. Not only is it boring with nothing to do, it is tiny. This game is tiny. There is, like, it's just, there's nothing to do. I don't know why the boat is even in this game when the overworld itself is so boring to explore and is so small and lifeless. Overall, another thing, like, the visual style, it's kind of similar to Minish Cap, but, like, I guess more 3D. It's always felt bland to me. And I think that permeates the entire game to me. It just feels bland and lifeless, Phantom Hourglass. The story, I thought was completely boring. Yeah, the touchscreen controls, I gotta touch on these again. This created a lot of awkward moments in the game, and it never felt right, the control scheme, all throughout the game. It was tolerable, I'll say that. The game can be, it's playable. It's not outright broken or anything like that. It's just, it never quite feels right. You always want that, the tactile feedback from just a standard D-pad and buttons. So it was really disappointing to see that Nintendo go with a choice like that for this game. Otherwise, the dungeons themselves I thought were very bland, just not creative, no cleverness to them like in previous Zelda games. The soundtrack, I thought, was completely forgettable. It just, nothing hit. Nothing made me go, oh, wow. And right from the beginning of the game, it's mostly boring, the entire game. Now, this would be okay. You know, this game would just be a mediocre game to me, or an average game to me, with all that said. But this game's biggest offender is something called the Temple of the Ocean King. Now, this is... I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I can't comprehend how someone would enjoy playing through this dungeon. What this is a dungeon that you have to come back to constantly throughout the entire game, and you're progressing through floors, which is actually, granted, a kind of a cool idea, except you have to go through from the beginning again. Every time you revisit the dungeon, you do get like I think I remember there being like a save point like halfway through the dungeon, but that's too little too late in my eyes, because by the time I reached that, I was so fed up with this dungeon. I was so pissed off at this game. This dungeon, basically, it takes the Phantom Hourglass into effect, which is basically a time limit. So you've got a time limit to go through this dungeon. Now, the entire dungeon is basically stealth, right? You have to avoid these enemies, and they have like vision cones, and if you're caught, you gotta run away. If they catch you, you're thrown back to the beginning. So you've got a dungeon that you have to constantly revisit, and do the same things over and over again, with no real puzzle solving or combat or anything like that. A very monotonous, tedious dungeon that just flat out isn't fun. You've got the time limit, so you're constantly just rushing for time, and you're constantly like, oh, I gotta get through this, and then if you run out of time, oh, well, do it all over again, you know. Like, you don't learn anything from doing it all over again. The whole dungeon, it's a mess. And I have to question, like, during, like discussions when they were making the game, they were fine with this. Like, they were all fine with this in thinking, like, this was a fun thing to play. I don't know. It's baffling to me. And it is what made me ultimately put down the game. I did not finish Phantom Hourglass. Between all that I said with, you know, the lifeless feel of it, and then ultimately that Temple of the Ocean King, I hit a point where I got to a point where I was so angry with this game that I was like, no, I can't do it. I can't do this. And so I put it down. There's also there's one little part of the game, one little puzzle where you had to, it's kind of neat if you think about it, but at the same time, I'm not going to spoil it, but the game makes no indication of what you're supposed to be doing. And honestly, I find it hard to believe anyone got through this puzzle without looking on the internet. Like, it's just one of those obtuse things that just really baffles me. The whole game is baffling to me. And I'm really shocked at the reviews it received when it came out. This game got 9s and 10s. Like, I don't know. The love for this game will forever elude me. I have no idea. I apologize. It seemed ranty. This game, I just despise it. I don't know. I get very... I get angry with it because the Zelda series is something I love so much, and to have a game like this come and disappoint me, I think that's the worst aspect, is how disappointing this game was to me. As someone that liked all the previous Zelda games, and even Twilight Princess, that a lot of people hated, I still like that game, like I said. To have something like this come and just completely disappoint me. But yeah, Phantom Hourglass just, not so great. So after that, I was thinking, okay, this next Zelda game, this next Zelda game can't possibly be any worse. So then we had Spirit Tracks next. Spirit Tracks, it's not much better. Again, this like my disappointment, honestly, might have been even worse as Spirit Tracks, because I was hoping they would fix the problems with Phantom Hourglass, and they didn't. The touchscreen controls are back again. Not such a big deal if the rest of the game's fine. Now, with this game, basically swap Temple of the Ocean King with the train concept, a gimmick, which I've said this before too. The newer Zelda games rely too much on gimmicks. The Temple of the Ocean King with Phantom Hourglass, the wolf stuff with Twilight Princess, and now the train with Spirit Tracks. The train minigame, I call it a minigame, but a majority of the game is spent on this train. Speeding up, reversing, adjusting tracks, scaring animals off the tracks, and it works as the overworld movement. Now, like, the overworld is just a pain in the ass to explore because of this train system, and it takes up so much of the game, and it's so repetitive, so monotonous, and again, you can fail really easily later in the game. It's very easily to fail these parts, and you have to do them over again. I don't know what is the obsession with, like, it failing and having to do it over again from so far away, like that. Like, I don't know. It's just irritating. The dungeons are definitely better this time around, I will say. The dungeons in Spirit Tracks definitely show far more creativity than they did in Phantom Hourglass, and they're quite challenging too. This game's actually quite challenging. I will say that. Same visual style, so it still, to me, has that lifeless feel, that bland, lifeless feel. Soundtrack just as unmemorable as Phantom Hourglass as well. The train stuff, to me, again, just like with the Temple of the Ocean King, I reached a point where it was so angering that I dropped it. I dropped this game. And this and Phantom Hourglass are the only Zelda games that I flat out dislike. I almost go as far as to say I hate them. And this game is admittedly slightly better than Phantom Hourglass. I wasn't quite as angry with this game overall. There's also another thing I hated with this game, the pan flute. Worst instrument in any Zelda game. You have to blow into the microphone to use this instrument, and it just doesn't work. It's broken. The instrument is flat out broken. Like, you'll be trying and trying, and you won't be able to get these songs right, even though you know you're doing it perfectly right. Again, it's one of those design decisions that's baffling to me. Like, the instrument, like, it's gimmicky and it's broken. But again, I gotta get in a better mood here. I don't want to talk too much about Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass. I'll just say, very disappointing games. I just flat out don't like them. But yeah, moving on to the next Zelda game. And finally, we have Skyward Sword, the latest Zelda game, which came out not too long ago. Skyward Sword. Like Twilight Princess before it, I like this game. I think Skyward Sword is a good, even great Zelda game. I kept going in my head, like, what's better, Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword? It's too hard for me to choose. I think they're both equally great, I think. But they both definitely have problems. Skyward Sword, story-wise, is actually quite good. Actually, it has an epic feeling, especially towards the end. And I don't know, I think the story overall was, without spoiling anything, was actually quite well done. It has a very long intro. I mean, the Zelda games got progressively worse with the intros and how long they were and how long it took to get going. And Skyward Sword, like, it's like hour and a half till you really get into the thick of things. Actually, probably more than that. Probably 2 hours even. Like, it takes a while to get into it. And towards the beginning, I was like, this is not so hot. But it does eventually get better. Obviously, Skyward Sword, the big thing was the Wii Motion Plus controls, and for the most part, they work well, and they create some really great moments. Where the touchscreen controls in the DS ones, I think, were half-baked ideas and just poorly executed. Here, other than a few different kind of moves, like the forward thrust kind of move, I found that didn't work a lot of the times, and some of the boss battles were kind of frustrating because you need to be super accurate, and with the Wii Motion Plus, you know, you're never going to be 100% accurate. It's never going to be that way, so it can be a bit frustrating, some of the boss battles, in that sense. But in terms of the puzzles and some of the other boss battles, the motion controls work quite well. The fourth dungeon of the game, the boss of that dungeon, amazing. It's completely epic, and it's awesome, completely due to the control scheme, which is great. So I'm glad kind of, I don't know, Nintendo, you know, whereas the motion controls in the DS ones, and they didn't really use those to a good advantage, I don't think. In Skyward Sword, for the most part, they do, I think. I guess in terms of, like, the soundtrack, I think is good. I think it's much better than Twilight Princess soundtrack. Granted, I still don't think it's all that memorable, though. I don't know. I think that's just a typical video game music in general thing for me, though. The dungeons are fun, they're clever, and this game is a lot more clever than Twilight Princess. You know, there's later in the game, you get this kind of like this object that kind of changes time around you, where you'll have this sphere around you, and it takes everything in that sphere is in the past, whereas the rest of the environment is in the future, or vice versa. And you have to solve puzzles like this, and carrying this ball that creates this sphere around you throughout this, like, old pirate ship. The whole desert portion of the game and the middle part of the game is, it's fantastic, really creative. This game has so many creative puzzles, I thought, and that's one of the best parts of Skyward Sword. I do have complaints, of course. First off, the overworld and how you have to traverse it. They wanted to change that up, I guess. They wanted to change up the formula a bit, but the way they've done it here is, I don't know, it's kind of more monotonous. You revisit the same areas constantly. The forest area, the fire area, the desert area, and the game's got this pattern that you keep following. It gets kind of tedious. You go to the forest, then you come back, then you go to the fireplace, come back to the main hub city, which I'll briefly touch on that. That I liked. I liked the main city in the sky. I think Skyloft is called. I don't quite remember. A lot of cool side quests there, fun people to talk to, great witty dialogue as always with the Zelda games. That I liked. The flying controls, too, with your bird flying through the sky. I thought that worked a lot better than I expected it to. But going back into this overworld, it just gets kind of repetitive, I think, going to the same place over and over again. There's not much variety in the environments, I don't think. The dungeons have a nice variety to them, but not the overworld itself. I don't know, I think that decision to go to that kind of overworld style, I think, was a poor one, in my opinion. The sky itself, too, is kind of bland. You have that main hub city, and then you have the islands you drop from the sky onto the ground below, and that's your overworld, but you've got these kind of rock formation type land areas in the sky you can land on. But the scope is really tiny. It's nothing compared to Wind Waker. Though I do have to appreciate, well, no, you know what? Twilight Princess did actually have more exploration than Skyward Sword, and that's probably one of my disappointments with this game. There's other parts, I will say, is the Spirit Realms, where, again, they have to tack on the stealth in the Zelda games. I don't know why. These areas were just not fun. You had to do it in a time limit, collect all these orbs without being seen by the enemies. It's just this tacked-on gameplay decision that it's just not fun. So I hated those parts. But I think the biggest complaint I have with Skyward Sword overall is the unnecessary amount of padding, especially towards the end of the game. Skyward Sword is a lengthy game, a good 40 to 50 hour game. That said, it could stand to be about 30 hours and nothing would be lost. There's a significant chunk later in the game that I think could have been just completely cut out. Two examples I'm going to give. First off, the last time you visit the forest area, you have to collect these tadpole music notes in this big giant water area. It is the most... This part of the game actually almost made me quit. Because when I reached it, I was already getting kind of tired of the game, wanting it to end. And then they throw this shit on you where you have to collect almost like a million of these music notes in this massive environment. I'm all for exploration, but when you have to collect every single one, it took for, like, this was a significant, like, hour-long section that just added nothing to the game. It was not fun. Didn't add anything story-wise from what I can remember. It was just tacked on there to add extra hours. Another instance is in the fire area for the last time when you lose all your equipment. Admittedly, there's some cool, clever puzzles you have to do because you're constantly gaining your equipment back one by one. Which this was seen in, I think, Oracle of Ages, I want to say. The same kind of thing was done before, and this comes way late in the game where you're getting tired of it. And there is one last dungeon in the game before you wrap up that it's a total mindfuck, but it came at a point in the game where I was getting kind of tired of it. This game, it's just a lot of unnecessary padding, I think, is Skyward Sword's biggest weakness. But overall, despite all that negative talk, I enjoyed the game overall quite a bit. I think it's one of the more creative Zelda games they've released in quite a while. Okay, guys, that's the overview of the Zelda series. My thoughts on every one. I guess now that's the end of part 2. Stay tuned for part 3, where I'll do the ranking from my least favorite all the way up to my favorite Zelda game, which, yeah, you guys probably have a good idea of what my favorite and least favorite are, but maybe not the middle part. But anyways, see you guys next time.